Welcome everyone to Council's May Ordinary Meeting. This is somewhat historic for Buloke Shire Council, as it is both the first time we have had a virtual council meeting and the first time we have broadcast a meeting. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting and the lands to where tonight's broadcast reaches. We also pay our respects to their elders and to elders from our other communities who may be in attendance. I've just got some housekeeping that I need to read out for the information of our viewers. Tonight is our first virtual meeting held for Buloke Shire Council. Throughout the meeting, councillors must be able to see, be seen, hear and be heard. To ensure we are meeting these guidelines, we will commence with a roll call of councillors to establish they are fully connected. So we'll begin with Lower Avoca Ward, Deputy Mayor Councillor David Pollard.
Yes, Councillor Stewart, Mayor Stewart, we can hear you loud and clear.
And can you see all the other councillors?
I can see all other councillors.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Bronwyn Simpson.
Thank you, Mayor Carolyn Stewart. I can see the other councillors. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Mallee Ward Councillor Alan White.
Good evening, everyone.
And Alan, can you please confirm that you can see and hear everybody else?
I can see and hear everyone else. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. My fellow Mount Jeffcott Ward councillors, Councillor Graham Milne.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. Yes, I can see and hear all other councillors. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Milne. And Councillor Darryl Warren.
Yes, good evening, Mayor, and good evening, customers. VP Zoom here. Yes, and I can hear everyone. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Warren. If a conflict of interest is declared tonight, the councillor or councillors who has the conflict will be removed from the meeting completely for that item and be reinstated after that item has been dealt with before the meeting can proceed. Councillors will vote by showing their hands, making sure their raised hand is within shot. If any councillor loses connectivity during the meeting will be suspended until connection is restored for all councillors. If council's broadcast of the council meeting experiences technical difficulties and drops out, the meeting will be adjourned for 30 minutes to re-establish connection. If the connection cannot be re-established, the meeting will be adjourned to a date and time to be advertised. So here we go. So I'll call for any receipt of apologies other than Councillor David Viz, who is on a leave of absence. It appears that we have all other councillors, which is excellent. Do we have any other apologies? No other apologies? So we'll move on to the confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. Can I please have somebody to move that council adopts the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on Wednesday the 8th of April 2020, please?
Councillor Stewart, I'm happy to move that those minutes be accepted.
Yep, thank you, Councillor Simpson. And a seconder? Councillor Pollard?
Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Pollard. Is anyone opposed?
No.
No? Okay, thank you. Motion carried. Do we have any requests for leave of absence?
No, Madam Mayor.
No? Thank you. Do we have any declarations of pecuniary and conflicts of interest?
No, Madam Mayor, at this stage.
No? Excellent. Okay, thank you. We don't have any questions from the public, so we'll move on to our procedural items. Item 7.1, report of Assembly of Councillors meetings. Can I please have somebody to move that council note the reports of the Assembly of Councillor meetings held on the 1st of April and the 15th of April 2020, please?
Happy to
Councillor
move that,
Neal?
Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. And a seconder?
Happy to move that.
Councillor
I'm
Warren?
happy.
Thank you. Can I just remind councillors if they could just put their microphones on mute and just indicate with their hands if they would like to move or second anything, and I'll call on you. Thank you. Do we have anyone opposed? No? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. Item 7.2, correspondence initiated by council. Can I please have somebody to move that council notes the record of correspondence sent and responses received, please? Councillor Pollard, if you want to just unmute and say that you want to move it.
I can move that, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Pollard. And a seconder? Councillor Simpson?
I'm happy to second that. Mayor Stewart?
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Is anyone opposed? No? Okay, thank you. Motion carried. Item 7.3, we don't have any letters of congratulations and recognition listed in the agenda, but I believe that Councillor Pollard has a late addition.
Yes, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move that we write a letter to Alistair Lama. Alistair's a member of the Birchip Rifle Club, and he's been chosen to be in the Australian F-Class team to compete in South Africa next year. Some of the events he'll be competing in is the 700, 800 and 900 metre distances, and these are going to take place over several days. And I think it's worth a recognition that one of our members in our community is going to represent Australia in a world-class event.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Is there any other additions before I ask for a mover? No? Okay, thank you. So can I please have somebody to move that council acknowledges and congratulates Alistair Lama, mentioned in this report now, for their achievements? Councillor Pollard to move, and a seconder? Councillor Milne?
Happy to second that, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Milne. Is there anyone opposed? No? Okay, thank you. Motion carried. Item 7.4, building permits monthly update. Can I please have somebody move that the council note the information contained in the report on the building permits approved by staff from the 1st of April 2020 to the 30th of April 2020, please? Councillor White?
Yep, I'm happy to move that motion.
Thank you, Councillor White. And Councillor Pollard?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'm happy to second that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Pollard. Is there anyone opposed? No? Excellent. Motion carried. Thank you. Item 7.5, planning applications received monthly update. Can I please have somebody to move that council notes the information contained in the report on planning applications under consideration by staff and the status of each of these applications, please?
Happy to move those, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. And a seconder? Councillor Milne?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Happy to second that motion.
Thank you. Is there anyone opposed?
No.
No. Excellent. Okay, thank you. Motion carried. So now we'll move on to our general business. We don't have any policy reports, so we'll move on to our management reports. Item 8.2.1, application for permit to keep excess animals at 22 King Street, Birchip. Mr. O'Toole, would you like to introduce that report, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, Council has received an application to keep a horse at 22 King Street, Birchip. Advertising was conducted with the neighbours. Council has received one objection. Officers are recommending that that application be refused.
Thank you, Mr. O'Toole. Can I please have somebody to move the officer's recommendation, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'm happy to move that officer's recommendation.
Okay. Oh, sorry, I should read that out in full then. That council refuses the application for a permit under council's Community Local Law 2019, clause 42, subsection 1, to keep one horse at 22 King Street, Birchip. So Councillor Warren to move that.
Yeah, thank you.
And do we have a seconder? Councillor White.
Yes, I'm happy to second that motion.
Thank you. Is there anyone opposed? Yep, we have
this
some.
where I asked?
Just a second, sorry, Councillor Simpson.
Is this
We've
where
just-
I asked to have an alternative motion?
Or an amended motion?
Yes.
Just a second, sorry.
You put a foreshadowed motion up.
Yes, so because we have a moved motion, we need to now allow the mover to speak, and you can foreshadow the motion. So we have our opposition, so we will now go to the mover for their chance to speak to the item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, fairly simple scenario here. Our local laws are fairly stringent on these matters, and we often get these things coming before council. It's a horse in an urban area. In looking at the information provided, very close to the caravan park and other amenities in the area. And I can see the concerns expressed even by one objector in keeping an animal of this nature in an urban area, which the laws are designed to support the urban amenity. So I believe the officers have made the correct recommendation here.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Councillor White, would you like to speak to the motion?
I agree with what Councillor Warren has said and have nothing to add.
Okay, thank you, Councillor White. Can we have somebody who opposes the motion to speak next, please? Councillor Simpson.
So, through the mayor, I have been and had a look at the area, and it is on the fringes of the township of Birchip, and so I would like to put forward a alternative motion that council grants the application for a permit under council's local law 2009.
Just 1 second. So, Councillor Simpson, can you please constrain your debate to the current motion, and then we can deal with your foreshadowed motion after that.
Okay, so through the mayor, I've been and had a look at the area. It is on the fringes of Birchip. The area is 8 in total, 8 house blocks, and so, and because I believe that animals are better cared for when they are close to the children that have those animals, I would like to speak against. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Do we have any other speakers for? Okay, is there any other speakers that would like to speak for or against? Councillor Milne.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to speak against the motion simply because while Councillor Warren says our local laws are very clear on what is allowed, local laws also allow that permits can be issued to keep animals in certain places within the township boundary. There is precedent, I would think, across our shire that horses are kept within the town boundaries. This is a an area that I think is suitable for a horse in that it's not closely populated. There is I believe one block between the property and the caravan park. While it is a vacant block, it still does give some distance, but I am happy to support an alternative motion going forward for keeping of a horse in at 22 King Street, Birchip. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you, Councillor Milne. Do we have any other speakers for or against? No? Oh, yep, Councillor Pollard.
I can speak against. I'm just reading through the parts where the objector has written in reference to flies, mice, smell, manure and dust. I believe because the area is of approximately 1 acre in size, that most of all those conditions could be looked after in that area with conditions in a permit, if a permit was granted. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pollard. We've had everyone speak. So I'll now put the motion.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor.
Oh, sorry, sorry, Councillor Warren, would you like the right of reply?
Right of reply. Look, my concern is based on, quite frankly, the current situation we find ourselves in. As I suppose, a survivor of the polio epidemic in the early 50s, it concerns me greatly that that epidemic was spread, generally speaking, by flies. I just have an issue in regard of what we're going through at the moment, that we're opening ourselves up to allowing flies, vermin, etc., within an urban area, which could have detrimental health impacts on the local population. I think, and this is the reason why we have these local laws, to protect ourselves. And I think currently that this is borne out very well. We need to be very conscious of what we're allowing in our urban areas, and these laws are put in for a certain reason. And I think to assert that there's no issues is quite wrong. So thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Now that everyone's had their say, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. And all those opposed? Okay, thank you. So motion failed. Do we have any alternative motions? Councillor Simpson.
Councillor Mayor Stewart, an alternative motion that Council grants the application for a permit under Council's Community Local Law 2019, Clause 42.1, to keep one horse at 22 King Street, Birchip, subject to the following conditions. 1, a maximum of 1 horse to be kept at the property. 2, the applicant must acquire a PIC, property identification code, within 30 days of notification. If the animal dies or is removed from the property, it cannot be replaced. Provision of adequate shelter is provided. Construction and maintenance of adequate fencing to contain the horse within the property. All gates to be secured to prevent escape. Provision of abatement measures to prevent nuisance from dust, vermin and insects. Storage of feed. Complementary feeding to occur as necessary to ensure the animal receives adequate sustenance. And compliance with Agricultural Victoria Code of Practice for the welfare of horses. 10, if the council receives valid complaints regarding the keeping of the horse, the permit may be revoked.
Thank you. So you will move that, Councillor Simpson? And
yes, I will.
Thank you. And can I have a seconder? Councillor Milne?
Happy to second that motion, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Is there anyone opposed to that new motion? We have an opposition, so we'll go back to the mover. Councillor Simpson, would you like to speak to the motion, please?
As I said before, Councillor Stewart, I believe that this area is, as I said, on the fringe of town, and we do have other townships with horses that are on their town fringes. I believe that the horse will be adequately cared for, especially as it will be adjacent to the residential property of the owners. So I am proposing that this alternative motion be considered.
Yep, thank you, Councillor Simpson. Councillor Milne, as seconder, would you like to address the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Also, like to just suggest that while this is going against the recommendation of the officers in one way, but we do have officers, local laws officers, that can keep a good close eye on the rules and regulations that go with keeping of animals, and certainly the conditions that will be placed on this permit. I think I'd rather give an opportunity for these people to succeed as opposed to not let them have a go at all. So, the rules are in place for if things fail. So I have no problem with allowing this horse to be kept, subject to the terms and conditions that are placed on the permit, and knowing full well that we have people who will diligently patrol those properties and deal with any complaints that come in, legitimate complaints that come in. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Milne. Councillor Warren, would you like to speak against the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll reiterate what I said before and just maybe emphasise one particular thing in our current situation. The current predicament we find ourselves in was, from all the reports, instituted by one bat in a community. Here we are inviting one animal into a community at close quarters. I think it speaks for itself that this is why we have these laws. Now, we are a rural shire. I would have thought that there would be plenty of opportunities outside the urban area to maintain an animal of this nature for people to enjoy. Thank you, Mayor.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Warren. Do we have anyone else to speak for the motion? Councillor Pollard?
Yes, Madam Mayor. As I said, reading the items that the objectors put it in, I believe the conditions that Councillor Simpson has read in the motion addresses those issues. So I'm quite comfortable to support it, to have a horse in the community. There's been horses in the community in Charlton for years, and we haven't had any health issues from them.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pollard. Do we have any further speakers for or against the motion? No? Okay, then I'll hand it back to Councillor Simpson for her right of reply if she wishes to exercise it.
No, I don't have anything further to add other than that I have been and had a look at this area, and I am familiar with the actual location.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Simpson. I'll now put it to the vote. So all those in favour? All those opposed? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 8.2.2, the Heavy Vehicle Safety and Productivity Program. Mr. O'Toole, could you please introduce that report, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Round 7 of the Heavy Vehicle Safety and Productivity Program has been made available by the federal government. $150 million is available in this round. Officers have reviewed the conditions and available with this funding, have looked at our long-term financial plan, identified 2 projects on the Berry Willick to Birchip Road for us to apply for funding for. Madam Mayor, the funding is available on a dollar-for-dollar basis. The two projects identified are total value with $3 million. So the recommendation is that council applies for $1.5 million.
Thank you, Mr. O'Toole. Do we have any questions? No? Okay, well then can I please have somebody to move that council submits an application under the Heavy Vehicle Safety and Productivity Program for roadworks on 2 sections of Berrowillick Birchip Road for $1,500,000 and notes that matching funding for this project will be sourced from council's 2020-21 Roads to Recovery funding allocation, please. Councillor Milne to move, and a seconder. Councillor Pollard to second. Do we have any opposition? No? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. Item 8.2.3, Buloke Advocacy Strategy. Mr. Judd, would you like to introduce that report, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this report is brought to council to consider the adoption of an advocacy strategy. This action, or the development of an advocacy strategy, was a key action in our annual plan document developed at the start of this financial year. Because Buloke has had a long history and a successful recent history, particularly around advocacy and many great outcomes for the community. This document aims to build on our previous work and aid in our activities to make sure we've got a clear priority setting and a clear case for financial and policy support. The strategy highlights a number of policies and infrastructure projects to council to push for over the next 12 months and beyond. And just to list a few, the completion of the Murray Basin Rail project, which has been a long priority of council, upgrades of streetscapes and caravan parks, funding for key recreational and aquatic centres, and of course increased funding for road maintenance and upgrades, which is the critical ask pretty much every time we go to government. These items have been established through review of community plans, through council plans, economic development strategies, and obviously master plans as well. We've done a lot of advocacy before, but this would be our first advocacy strategy. The recommendation is that if council do adopt this, that a review is undertaken in the first 12 months to review its effectiveness and to ensure that it's on the right track. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Judd. Do we have any questions or comments? No? Okay, then can I have somebody to move that council adopts the draft advocacy strategy and review the strategy within 12 months, please?
Sorry, Councillor Stewart, I had a question.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor White.
Yep. Sorry. My apologies.
No, that's okay. First time on Zoom, not Zoom, but on live broadcast, if things can happen. My question is to Mr. Judd. This advocacy strategy does certainly look really good. How do you see it actually being used? Will it be used by officers, by councillors, or in a combination of different ways?
Thank you, Councillor White, for that question, and through the Mayor, absolutely a combination of ways. And I think it's ensuring that officers and councillors are certainly on the same page and have that one universal approach to the way we advocate and what we're advocating for. Clearly, this document highlights a range of different areas, so that we don't just have the one priority. That certainly, as funding becomes available, we can move through this document. So it also will form a piece that the community can use, because the community is focused heavily in terms of this, and we've drawn heavily from community plans in establishing these priorities.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. And Mr. Judd, does that answer your question, Councillor White?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Do we have any further questions? No? Okay, in that case, I definitely didn't see any hands there. Can I please have somebody to move that council adopt the advocacy strategy and review the strategy within 12 months, please? Councillor Pollard to move. And a seconder. Councillor Simpson to second. Do we have anyone opposed to the motion? No? Okay, in that case, motion carried. Item 8.2.4, Annual Report 2019-20 April Quarterly Update. Mr. Judd, could you please introduce that report, please?
Thank you, Mayor. This is a quarterly report, so council has seen this report before, which is a report against progress against our annual plan. The annual plan have been adopted over the last 3 years by this council to ensure we're meeting and achieving the priorities and the strategies set out in the original council plan. I guess the attached report highlights some of the progress and also a couple of the delays in projects and programs and priorities that we've set out to achieve this year, and particularly progress since February. So some of the highlights, clearly the works happening up at Lake Tyrrell have progressed, and we're really looking forward to seeing those works completed over the next 3 to 4 months. We've led a tender for the Birchip Streetscape project, which has been a long-term priority for that community. We've put in funding expressions of interest, particularly to the federal government, on road infrastructure projects. And today we've received notification of funding for the Witcherproof Streetscape upgrade, which is really positive as well. It also highlights some delays. So the much talked about Donald Community Precinct, whilst works are 99.5% completed, and we're hoping for a final sign-off tomorrow, that is yet to be able to be ticked off. And also COVID pandemic has meant that there has been some delay. So the the municipal early years plan has been delayed due to the inability to consult. And also the Local Government Act, which is going to go through some work around best practice workforce development plans. And so therefore we've considered pushing back that project to make sure we meet the requirements highlighted under the new Local Government Act, and we will be mandated to bring this in. Councillors, this report is presented to you for noting.
Thank you, Mr. Judd. Do we have any questions? Councillor Warren?
Yes, Madam Mayor, just to clarify on one particular point, this report will be amended to reflect that the Donald Community Precinct project has not got a certificate of occupancy as of tonight. Is that correct?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Warren. Absolutely, we had amended that report late this afternoon. So yes, it's as it stands, no certificate of occupancy for that project.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Judd, and thank you, Councillor Warren. Do we have any further questions? No? Okay, then can I please have somebody to move that council notes the progress against the Year 3 Annual Plan 2019-20 Quarterly Update, please?
Happy to move that, Madam Mayor.
Yep, Councillor Warren to move, and a seconder? Councillor Pollard to second. Do we have anyone opposed to the motion? No? Okay, then in that case, motion carried. Thank you. So we'll move on to item 8.3, our financial reports. So item 8.3.1, financial performance report as at the 31st of March 2020. Ms. Yu, would you like to introduce that report?
Thank you. Through the Mayor, our financial statements for the period ending 31st of March are presenting to Council this evening. Key variances outlined in the report include the delay in funding with the Lake Tyrrell project and the flood recovery works. We have adjusted the timing in our financial statements to reflect the expected delay in receiving federal assistance grants with no advance payment, as we've seen in previous years, and also taken up a provision for a potential call in the defined benefits superannuation. So councils will note that although our normal operations remain aligned with the adopted budget. The variances in relation to those three aspects have been included in the March financial statements.
Thank you, Ms. Yu. Do we have any questions? No? Okay, then can I please have somebody move that council receives and notes the financial performance report for the month ending 31st of March 2020, please? Oh, Councillor Pollard to move, and a seconder. Was that you, Councillor Milne, had your hand up? Thank you, Councillor Milne. Do we have anyone opposed to the motion? No? Okay, then in that case, motion carried. Item 8.3.2, presentation of proposed 2020-21 budget for approval in principle and at least 28 days public submissions period. Mr. Judd, would you like to introduce that report, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So as indicated, we bring you the draft 2021 budget to consider to release to public submission for community feedback. As per previous years, there's been a range of workshops working through service planning throughout the year, and obviously a range of reviews, particularly against our long-term financial plan in the development of this draft budget. It highlights a range of initiatives going into next year, and highlighted particularly by a large capital works program. So 12.2 million being one of the largest ones in recent, and the highest amount of own source revenue into own source, and also the $3 million of repair work from the floods back in December 2018, particularly around Canoa Bridge and Birchip. There's also a range of tourism and retail related projects, so streetscape upgrades with Birchip and Witchyproof, riverfronts in Charlton and Donald, and clearly Lake Tyrrell continues and the ability to finish that project, but also caravan park upgrades throughout the Shire as well. We continue to provide support through to forums and recreational groups. We are looking to provide additional support to our lakes committees who will be without camping revenue through the COVID pandemic to help them pay for the top up of their water. Under the proposed budget, there is a rebate to be made available for businesses that pay food, beauty and prescribed accommodation fees. They can apply to get a refund on those fees if they're experiencing hardship. Other initiatives include the development of a climate change mitigation and adaptation strategy, and obviously the cost of elections and inductions of new councillors and the Local Government Act are included in this budget. The rating is modelled at a 2% increase in line with the Minister's cap. And given the significant increase in farm valuations, which we've seen in previous years as well, the recommendation of office is to move the farm differential rate from 82 down to 80% to, I guess, share the burden as effectively as we possibly can. We anticipate there'll be a range of changes going forward in terms of the next month even, but also going forward with the impact of COVID and the pandemic will certainly impact on income. We do expect that stimulus measures will ramp up, and when we can play a role, no doubt we'll discuss that in the future, but clearly also understanding the hardship and the take up of residents and ratepayers to our hardship policy is somewhat unknown at the moment. So it's really important that we review this ongoing. The recommendation is there for council to consider.
Thank you, Mr. Judd. Do we have any questions? No? Oh, sorry, Councillor White.
Yeah, maybe I'm falling off your radar there. I guess this is a really good budget. There's a lot of really good things in it. There's hopefully going to be employment opportunities for local people, local businesses, and it certainly achieves many of the goals in the council and the community plans. But I think that there's one thing missing, and I've been advocating for this for a long time, and that is the neighbourhood houses in Buloke. neighbourhood houses, as everybody knows, we have 5 of them in Buloke. They provide a diverse range of community development projects. They've been instrumental in supporting communities through drought, through floods, more droughts, and now in the COVID-19 pandemic. They've really stepped up to the mark and do a marvellous job in our communities, and support council, and council works with them. I certainly understand that. Certainly no competition there. They do support each other, but I always find it disappointing that we can't provide some kind of financial support or other resources, real resources, to support each of the 5 neighbourhood houses in Buloke for all of the work that they do. And I wondered if it's possible to consider including them. You know, this is a consultation period that we're going into about this budget. Is it possible to for council to look at how we can offer support to neighbourhood houses as part of this budget? Because I really think they're the ones in their community who are have been omitted from this budget, when perhaps we should be looking at including them and strengthening everything that they do in support of our communities.
Yep. Do we have someone who wants to answer that? Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor White, and thank you, Mayor. So yeah, it's a fair point that they've certainly stepped up to the mark, and they do an enormous amount of work for our community. And I guess, you know, these are the things that we can pick up during the consultation phase. Certainly it will form part of our advocacy for certainly the community groups that are working with us, particularly around recovery. We're getting that message about the support for the support that we can provide, or that neighbourhood houses particularly are looking for. It is funded obviously predominantly through the state government. One of the initiatives that we are looking at directly, which we're progressing as you know, recently as today, is around the Working for Victoria, and looking at employing people that can go out and do work with neighbourhood houses. So that wouldn't necessarily be around financial support, but certainly human resource support, that we could provide support to them. But there's some work to do. So perhaps we pick this up through the consultation phase. Madam Mayor, would be my suggestion.
Thank you, Mr. Judd. Councillor White, does that answer your question?
Well, I'm pleased to hear that we will be looking at it. It's not something that's just been put away again to come back out again next year, because I really feel that it is a vital part of our communities. And while they are funded through state government, each of our neighbourhood house coordinators and their volunteer committees spend a lot of hours every week writing funding applications, developing up project plans, so that they can build on the funding, the 25 hours or however many hours each of them are given from the state government to provide that huge range of services. And they're able to make a dollar go a long way. So even small amounts of funding would be really helpful. Not sure that another person would be, but that's something that we can debate in the council chamber at a future briefing. But I'm glad to hear that we will be continuing this conversation.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Milne, I did see your hand up before. Did you have a question?
More of a comment, Madam Mayor, if that's okay.
Yep, that's okay.
So my comment is, with regards to the budget, is that while it's nice to be able to stick to the plan, the 10-year plan and the community plan and every other plan that we've got, the thing that I want to talk about is that while you make a plan, the minute you make it, it's out of date to somewhat. So from that point of view, while we set in the plan an average rate rise every year, and that we stick to the rating strategy on the that we've got, there's always time for discussion about having a zero rate rise, which we've talked about. That certainly is my position. While I acknowledge the fact that we have discussed it well and hard through briefings and whatever else, it is a position that I hold as far as for this potential budget going forward. I would hope that our ratepayers take the opportunity seriously to look at the opportunity to lobby council. We saw it last year. It did work to a degree. Who knows whether it'll work this year? It's about having councillors on side, talking to your councillors and getting them listening to your point of view. But we're talking about probably $260,000 to $70,000 to come out of the budget. I understand that that's a difficult thing to do, to take out of a budget once you've got things set in. But in the big scheme of things, just altering the differential does not suit everybody. As we see, some property values go up, some go down. So some will have an increase, some will have probably a slight decrease. But the idea of having a zero rate rise, to me, is probably something responsible in this situation. Probably farmers have had their best year ever and may well be able to afford it, but they are catching up from a long way back. And I do think that the responsible thing for this council to do would be have a zero rate rise. So I hope that our ratepayers take the opportunity to lobby. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Milne. Councillor Warren.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you for the opportunity to have my say. I've been one of the advocates, I suppose, with Councillor Milne through this process to advocate for a zero rate rise. When we see the budget documents presented for us tonight, they make interesting reading. And I mean, under normal circumstances, a $40 million spend in the Buloke Shire is incredible. Of that $8 million, now I'm rounding this up because $8 million in roads. Now, I know that takes in some flood works, but effectively it's $8 million in roads, nearly $1 million in plant and machinery, a surplus of $5.7 million, a surplus of $5.7 million. I think after the last, certainly, number of years that I've been on council and the years before that where the community endured a hell of a lot of pain going forward due to the sins of previous councils and had to pay back a $7 million loan, which was achieved last November. Therein alone would have been $170,000 worth of savings from the interest that we're paying on that loan. The round figures of a 2% change, and echoing Councillor Milne's words, $242,000 would have been the hit to the budget this year. Long-term financial plans are very much that, long-term plans. If we only have to look at the state and federal governments at the moment to see the impact that the virus has had on Australia, look, our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren are probably going to be paying that off forever, the way it is. But governments have to make decisions based on what's going on at the moment. And I think in our best scenario, to assist our ratepayers, and we only had, if you like today, that one of the impacts in our ratepayers, 70-odd% of them who are farmers, will be the impost put on by the Chinese government in regard to barley. I mean, I don't know what farmers are planting at the moment, but I wouldn't have thought you would have been planting barley if there was no market for it. So I think we have to be very careful how we do that. 2%, as I say, $242,000 in the scheme of things, where we've saved $170,000 in paying back a loan. We'll be very interested in what comments the community have, and we'll come back to see what their thoughts are. I can be assured, though, that I know this group of councillors, and have shown in the past, will listen to what the community says, because we have taken up what they have said in the past and made changes to our budgets. So I look forward to seeing the budget out there for community comment and to getting that feedback from the community. I thank the officers for the work they've done, because I mean, it's a difficult, when this started, one didn't know the road we had to go down. It was difficult, and it's only getting worse each day. So I think really as councillors, we should be looking the well for our community, and we should give them some support, and that should be no rate rise this year, in deference to the fact that we don't know what's ahead. But I think our budget should be strong enough and robust enough to carry that burden. Thank you, Mayor.
Unless there's any other questions, I'll now put the motion. Oh, actually, sorry, we better put the recommendation to be moved. Sorry, Councillor Pollard, did you have a question?
Yes, I've got a lot of concern about a zero rate rise. I'm going to be honest, like, yes, I'm a farmer. Yes, we're into the area that we're paying a big chunk of the rates. But as well as that too, the council offers us a lot of services. Through all our deliberations, all our discussions, it's more. More money for lakes, more money for neighbourhood houses, more money for this, more money for that. When we were paying off our $7 billion loan, our roads went to crap. We've got to start putting money into the roads via our long-term financial plan, or Councillor Warren and Councillor Milne will have this Shire back worse than what it was, because we haven't got the easy gains. I know there's a lot of shaking of the heads, and I know that with major plant. We need to spend a major plant, because if we don't spend it on major plant, we're going to be spending it on maintenance. And if maintaining old plant, we end up with a whole lot of stuff. We end up with staff that can't do their job properly because their plant is always breaking down. So we're stuffed the other way. So we've got to be careful by doing it. Yes, I'd love a zero rate rise, but as well as that too, the cost of doing a kilometre of roads goes up approximately 4% a year. We're only doing 2%. That's only half the cost of an expected road rate rise. So we've got to be careful by, if we're not going to increase our revenue as purposeful directors, we're not going to operate. This council is going to actually go back further than what it was 7 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you. We're starting to get into debate there, so I need to put this motion forward. Can I please have somebody to move that council, having prepared the draft 2020-21 annual budget in accord with section 127 of the Local Government Act 1989, gives public notice in accord with section 129 of the Act to advertise in local newspapers for a minimum 28-day period, and make the draft 2020-21 annual budget available on council's website. And the second point, allows persons to make submissions under section 223 of the Local Government Act 1989 on any proposal contained in the draft 2021 annual budget, and allows presentations in support of written submissions to be heard at council's ordinary meeting to be held on the 10th of June 2020. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Milne to move. And
yeah, happy
seconder,
to move that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Milne. And a seconder, Councillor Pollard to second. Do we have anyone opposed to the motion? Okay, we have some opposition. Councillor Milne, as mover, would you like to address the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, look, as this is a budget that's going out for community discussion, I'm happy to put it out there that that the community discusses the budget, and I hope they do so in all through all facets of the budget and have a good look at it. In the past, we've seen that, or in the distant past, we've seen that probably some of our community has been a little bit complacent when it comes to having a look at the budget. Recent times, we've seen that people have taken a little bit more interest. So I would encourage people to have a look at the budget, and by putting this one out in the form that it's in now, it shows what the situation will be if it becomes adopted, and that that their opportunity to have their say and potentially make changes is there in front of them. So I have no problem in putting this this budget out for discussion in the form that it's in, knowing that if enough people make the take up the offer, changes can and could be made. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Milne. Councillor Pollard, as seconder, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I'd like to thank the staff for putting a whole lot of effort into getting this budget out. But the main thing is when the community come to comment on it, make sure they get us to say what services they want us to reduce on. Because as soon as we start reducing our income, we've got to reduce services. I haven't heard of a community yet wanting their swimming pool closed. I haven't heard of a community wanting their library shut. That's where we've got to start looking at saving money if we're going to start reducing income. So just the main thing is we've got to suggest as councillors, or the community's got to suggest what they don't want that the council provides. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pollard. Councillor Warren, as opposer, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I won't say any more than what's already been said. I think those that have spoken for the motion have indicated what they think about the situation. And it now will be up to the ratepayers as to how they perceive those views and give us their views. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Do we have any other speakers for or against the motion? No? Okay, in that case, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? All those opposed? Motion carried.
Can we have a division there, please, Madam Mayor?
Yep, certainly. Okay, all those in favour? So we have Councillor White, Councillor Pollard, Councillor Simpson, Councillor Milne and Councillor Stewart. All those opposed? Sorry, was that too quick? All those opposed? Councillor Warren. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to item, we don't have any organisational reports. We'll move on to item 8.5, reports from councillors. If anyone would like to speak to a report, just raise your hand and I'll call on you. Do we have any reports? No, no reports from councillors. Okay. We'll move on to our other business. So we don't have any notices of motion. We don't have any questions. Oh, sorry. We don't have any questions from councillors listed, but do we have any questions from councillors? Councillor Warren?
Yes, look, Madam Mayor, I did notice late today that there was an email that suggested that the Minister has not made a decision in regard to council elections this year, and that perhaps he was going to make that decision on Friday of this week. Is that correct?
Yes, that's my understanding, that it'll be later this week.
Okay, so we will get an indication where there will be elections this year in our municipality.
Yes, hopefully. Fingers crossed.
Thank
but
you.
We should know by at least next week.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Is there any further questions from councillors? No? Okay. We don't have any urgent business or any other business or any matters which may exclude the public. So we'll close the meeting. Our next meeting will be held on Wednesday, the 10th of June at 7 p.m. and it's yet to be decided whether that will be via Zoom or in person. But thank you all for attending and thank you to anyone that tuned in through our live streaming service.